Planet Dolan.
Hello, my name is Cookie. The story I'm about to tell you is relatively personal, but I wanted to raise awareness about it. When I was 4 years old, my mum and my dad got divorced and my dad moved out. Being so young at the time, I had no idea what was going on, but I grew up visiting my dad on the weekends and staying with my mum for the majority of the week. It was easier this way because my childhood home was actually across the road from my primary school. I don't really remember much of my mum from that age because she never seemed to be in and around. I grew up being raised by my current stepdad, who'd drive us to places we needed to go, worked a day job and bought food for the house, and even helped me with schoolwork if I needed it. I have two brothers, one that's 3 years younger than me and another that's 7 years older. For some reason, my older brother moved in with my dad not too long after the divorce, and I never knew why. I didn't see a lot of him. During the school year, we would break up from holidays from school where we'd get a week or more away, which you would think would be fun, but my brother and I were left at something called an after-school club. It was basically a building across from our school where they would take you in for the day and let you read, play games, and run around as long as you were in the school premises. All I remember was spending the entirety of the weekdays of our holidays there, watching the other children getting picked up during the day by their parents, and us being the last ones left. My stepdad would always pick us up as the club was closing and walk us back home, and my mum would be cooking by that time. Back when I was little, my mum worked as a doctor in a hospital not too far from my house, but when she had my little brother, she must have left it to care for myself and my brothers. It would explain why she's home a lot, but I don't know why we weren't allowed to keep in touch with her during the holidays. I didn't question it. Keeping in touch with my dad got harder as he met a new partner and moved house. I remember visiting my dad's for the weekend and my new stepmom would always stick her nose up at us, telling us about how our clothes didn't fit and we stank. I was only 8 at the time, so I didn't understand a lot about body hygiene or clothes. So she would take me shopping from time to time and teach me how to keep myself clean. When my dad would drop me off at the end of the weekend, my mum would always glare at me when I showed her my new clothes, telling me about how trashy or cheap they looked. As life went on, I graduated primary school and moved to high school, which didn't have an after-school club attached to it, thankfully. I remember being so relieved I would be able to spend time at home during the holidays. During which, though, when me and my brother would be in the house watching TV, my mum would be upstairs in her room. We would have to ask her if we could have something to eat or if we could go outside, but she was almost always in there, and I never knew why. Though when she came out of her room, she always looked so dazed and tired, slurring her words and stumbling about, even falling down the stairs at one point. It wasn't every day that this happened, but when it did, she would be asleep in her room for hours at a time, leaving me and my brother to find food or do things to keep ourselves entertained. Sometimes, though, my mum would take us somewhere, usually being a soft play that wasn't that far away from our house. She would drive us there and let us run around for a few hours, drive us home, and then just go up to her room again until my stepdad came home. One day, however, my mum was in another dazed state and had told us that we were all going to the shop with her in the town centre. We drove and parked and walked around for a bit. She was stumbling and mumbling the entire time, and when we were finished shopping, walked back to the car. As we were pulling out and began to drive, however, about 5 minutes into driving, I'd say, we were pulled over by the police. She had parked and my brother and I sat in the car waiting. I was only 11 at the time and my brother was 8, so we didn't know what was going on. My mum got out of the car and told us to stay before leaving. I remember waiting for what seemed like ages for Mum to come back, but she never did. Instead, a police officer opened the door to our car and told us to come with them. I was still very much confused, so my brother and I got out of the car and were escorted to the police station. I remember distinctly sitting in a plain white cafeteria room with a small, busted-up television and a few vending machines. The two police officers sat us down and began to ask us things like if my mom had been anywhere before she started driving and where we lived. When I explained to them that we went shopping and gave them my address, they both looked at each other and one of them just left the room. The other bought us a chocolate bar each from the vending machine and told us that someone would pick us up shortly. About an hour later, my stepdad walked into the station and told us to come to the car. He drove us home and didn't say a lot in terms of what happened to my mum for the rest of the night, despite me asking endlessly where she was. He had told us that she was staying with a friend for the night and that was all. At the time, it was a Thursday night, so my dad would come and pick us up the following day for our weekend with him. When we came outside on the Friday, my dad looked so sad and cuddled us both before letting us in the car. The ride to his home was quiet until we got there. Once we parked, my dad then went on to explain that my mum had been arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol and had almost hit numerous cars while doing so, and that we'd be staying with him for the weekend and the following week. When I walked into the house with him, my stepmom, stepbrothers, and older brother rushed up to us and cuddled us closely. My brother and I still didn't know what was going on, as at the time we didn't understand what drinking and driving was. The weeks after that were horrible. On midterm holidays, we were with our mum. She would be as she always was, but I would find things around the house. For example, bottles hidden in my room or laundry basket. When I had told my stepdad about this when he got home, he took it upon himself to buy me a phone and told me to call him in case anything like that happened again. The day after that, my mum wouldn't speak to me, and when I tried to ask her for something, she would snap, screeching about how I lied about her hiding things to my stepdad. Whenever she got angry, she had a tendency to block the only exit off so we couldn't leave. This would happen on numerous occasions, and I would slowly learn to avoid her the best I could. Not long after that, my school was informed about the driving incident, and soon a social worker was involved, and we were separated from our mum and stepdad. After a year of visits and talks, it was concluded that we'd live with our dad and visit my mum and stepdad on our terms. Since then, I've avoided her and my stepdad, dodging their calls and texts. In present times, my dad, little brother, and I moved into a new house, and we had a housewarming night with my older brother and his partner. We began all talking about our old house and history, and my mum was brought up. My dad explained the situation to us, and we all recalled the memories. I asked my big brother why he had moved out with dad so soon, and as it turns out, my big brother would protect myself and my little brother from my mum whenever she was angry whilst drunk. Apparently, we'd sit in his room for hours at a time as she had a tendency to lash out and hit us. But being so young at the time, I didn't remember any of this. My dad tried to get custody of us to move us out of that house, but it didn't go anywhere, so my brother moved in with my dad. It was a heartwarming and heartbreaking night. Abusive family members are something that needs to be treated a lot more seriously in modern days, and if any of you are suffering from one or something similar, please reach out to somebody. It could be a friend, teacher, or even another family member. Just please don't suffer in silence. You don't deserve it.